Based off the Warriors extending Steph Curry through 2026, 2027, the plan seems simple, right? It's get Steph Curry number 5 before he turns 40 years old. Executing that, not going to be as simple. We're talking about it on today's Locked On Dubs.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen of every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are free and available wherever you get your audio podcasts. Another good way to check us out is on YouTube. And when you're there, give us that like, give us that subscribe. We very much appreciate it. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. My name's Charlie Walter. I'm your host, formerly of 95.7 The Game in San Francisco and KPIX, which is CBS. I covered the Warriors title run from 2021, 2022. Kylan Mills is the other host on this show. She is out on assignment, actually covering the Michigan State versus Maryland game on the Big Ten Network. So I welcome in the reinforcements, formerly of 95.7, now at the rival station KNBR. It's Matt Kolsky. What's up, my friend?
Hello. How we doing?
I'm good. And the Warriors appear to be doing, I don't know what they're doing. I think a lot of people can say the same thing. The plan is to get Steph Curry number 5. Question is, how are they going to get it done? So we're breaking it up piece by piece. What are the Warriors' plans this year at the trade deadline and beyond? But let's start this off with prefacing that we both read a little article. The Ringer came out with an article essentially saying what every Warriors fan is asking, and that is, what's Golden State doing? We know that Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Andrew Wiggins are about to be a critical piece of this future through 26, 27. That's a given. We are all understanding that Brandon Podziemski is most likely going to be a big part of this next 3-4 year stretch, considering they have not traded him. But when it comes to Kuminga and when it comes to the assets they have that they could potentially flip, what is this team going to look like at the trade deadline? What is this team going to look like come camp next year? But let's start with the whys and the nows, man, because the Warriors are trying to make this an incredible final chapter to a wonderful story.
Man, you think you think at 39, Steph is going to be able to be the best player on a title team? I hope you're right. We'll see. I think based on what we saw this summer and the last couple of years, he's still there now. And if it's only 1 or 2 years of this left, it's a really big ask to try to get a championship. It just is. And I think for Warrior fans and just Steph Curry fans, if the 2022 title is that last hurrah, that's still pretty awesome. And 4 titles puts him in the pantheon anyway. Obviously, the 5th takes him to that other level. The only non-Bill Russell Celtics above, 5 and above are, the guys you think of either as the classic championship role players, Rodman, Ori, that sort of guy, or it's Jordan, it's Pippen, it's Kareem. I think Magic has 5. It's the who's who. It's the Mount Rushmore candidates. And I think Steph Curry belongs there as a player. Whether he's able to do it, there's a lot of factors. And like you said, did I hear you say Wiggins as a guy who is definitely part of the future?
I mean, what else are they going to do with him? If no one wants him, he's a part of your future. Unless
you said the thing. If nobody wants him, or if nobody wants to take on that contract for some other reason, right? I actually, in reading the article you mentioned, one of my big takeaways was a imaginary trade that I can at least convince myself is a remote possibility. You want to hear about it?
Let's hear it.
All right. First of all, Michael Pena, who wrote the article in question, he got some bars in here. There's some really good stuff. And I think I think he has a really solid understanding and reasonable view of what the Warriors are and what they can be. One of the things he says is that here, I'll read straight from it. Blockbuster deals are never easy, and it makes some sense for Golden State to see what it has before any rash decisions are made. But in whiffing on Paul George and Markkanen, the Warriors kept their powder dry. If another star becomes available at a price that makes sense for everyone involved, they can craft a compelling offer. And the three guys that they mention in the star category are Brandon Ingram, who I've said before, I think maybe even on the show, I would not have any interest in as for the Warriors.
Not with that much money.
Well, it's the money. It's what you'd have to give up. And it's just, we talked about the guys they brought in this offseason and how even if they're not stars, they really make sense. They fit in a way that makes sense. And Brandon Ingram is the opposite of that. He is, I guess, a star. He's certainly been an all-star, but I don't see how he fits. Julius Randle is the second guy, which I'm a little more interested in, although not a defender, another undersized big. There are reasons not to do it, but I at least like what he would bring them offensively. He is a very smart offensive player. And this is the one, Jimmy Butler. Now, obviously, before the season, there were some rumblings, right? We heard some Jimmy Butler rumblings. And in the past, when we've heard Jimmy Butler rumblings, he's traded within a year. So I think the possibility of Jimmy Butler being traded either at the trade deadline or next offseason is relatively high. Now, it's possible there would be a lot of suitors and a lot of good offers. It's also possible there wouldn't. You know, I don't know what, I think he's 36, 37. I don't know what an old Jimmy Butler draws for Miami in the trade market. Also, famously, Miami often believes, hey, if we get player X into our program, we can bring him to another level. And who is a more bring him to another level candidate than the aforementioned Andrew Wiggins? So what if you build a deal around Moody, Wiggins, maybe a couple future picks for Jimmy Butler? Now you have a three that you know is going to play defense, you know is happy to move the ball and take a back seat a lot of the time, but also can play some bully ball and go get a bucket for you one-on-one if you need to. I think Jimmy Butler would be an incredible fit. And from a timeline perspective, if he's only got a year or two left, so what?
I agree. I mean, it's based off what you're giving up. And if they're willing to take Wiggins and you don't have plans for Moses Moody, and based off them the Warriors throwing Moses Moody in that original package deal with some picks for Lauri Markkanen, and obviously the Jazz said, hell no, we're not doing that. But it does tell me that the Warriors are at least open.
They're more than willing to trade Moody. I mean, I'll say,
and I think they're more than willing to trade Wiggins too if the price is right. Of course. Right? So Wiggins, Moody, and then you throw in a draft pick. If the Bulls would be willing to take that, I would absolutely think that could help Golden State now. And you're right, as long as he was under contract. Which, how long is that? I think it's like one more year. Yeah,
it's not much, but he's old, and who cares? You only want a year or two out of Jimmy Butler anyway.
Do you like going the year-by-year route, though? Because the Warriors did that last year with Chris Paul, and I know that the Chris Paul flip was more of just probably a salary dump to where they were looking ahead for the future. But at the time, they said that
Jordan.
Yeah, they were. But at the time, they said that Chris Paul was going to come in and have a role on the team, and he does that for a year. And if you do the same thing with Jimmy Butler, a relic version where he's not the same player that he once was, although still pretty effective, do you want to go that year by year of the end of Steph Curry's tenure to where it's like, let's just keep on plugging in old stars that may have some left in the tank?
Did you check? Is it 1 year left on his contract?
I can look that up while you banter.
He's 34, so a little younger than I thought, but it's a rough 34. We've all seen it. I think being in this environment where there's much less offensive pressure on him than in Miami would help. It would take a lot of the physical load off of him in the regular season. Because the one thing about Butler is he can score almost at will, but he does it by banging. He has
a player option. Yeah, and he has a player option in 25.
And if things go well, hopefully he'll pick it up, right? I mean, again, I don't think anyone's going to be jumping to pay 35, 36-year-old Jimmy Butler boatloads of money. So if he's looking at, hey, where can I play with someone who could take the scoring pressure off of me and maybe have an outside shot at this thing, Golden State's as good as Miami, certainly, and he seems to be a little restless in Miami. Look, the price, what I gave you, Wiggins, Moody, and draft picks, is wishful thinking. I'm obviously trying to get it done without giving up Podziemski or Kuminga. I don't know if it makes as much sense if you had to give up Kuminga, for instance, but I'd certainly think about it. Going from a top, I mean, listen, if you look at the rest of the West, it's the top of the roster that the Warriors are lacking. And undeniably, even if you did give up Kuminga, Jimmy Butler improves the top of your roster today. No question.
Yeah.
If you give up Kuminga and or Podziemski, I think it hurts the quality of your roster dramatically in the future, so it may not be worth it. But of all the names, for whatever reason, I hadn't connected the dots on Butler before, and this article made me think about it. Of all the names I've heard, now that Markkanen's off the table and, Paul George went to Philly, Butler is by far the most intriguing. So anyway, whether it's Butler or somebody else that I haven't thought of, right? Because this is the point. People get disgruntled in the NBA all the time. There's a new guy every year that we're not expecting that's going to be potentially on the trade market. Warriors have some assets, even potentially without giving up the one or two that they like the most. That's on the table. And if it doesn't happen, it's still a team that for the regular season, I think is going to be interestingly competitive because they are deep.
Coming up, we're continuing this conversation about how the Warriors are going to just kind of restructure this new era that still feels like an era of old. How can they win a championship with the pieces they currently have? A big component into being competitive is internal growth. But how much internal growth do the Warriors need, and who do they need it from? That's coming up. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. The ESPN expert panel on our last show had picked the Golden State Warriors at 8th. A lot of comments were rolling in. I see 10, 11 teams that are better right now than the current rendition of the Golden State Warriors. I'm thinking they're going to be more on the outside looking in. I don't really know until the ball is up in the air and opening tip-off is underway. But one thing we do know is that this is a transitional phase. I mean, it's still, at least for the time being, it's Curry, it's Draymond, and it's Wiggins. Those are your three guys that are locked up for the foreseeable future. Well, but you get rid of two aging Hall of Famers and Paul and Thompson this offseason, one of which has been a staple. That right there is a huge transition. But it's still, the way that the Ringer put it was, transitional phases are always tough when the past is transcendent enough to dictate the future. Yeah. That's a banger right there. That's a banger right there. I mean,
there's some bars.
Yeah, that's kind of the situation that the Warriors are stuck in right now. It's like you're kind of stuck in the past because the past is still the present, but it's not going to be the present for that much longer. So you got to look ahead towards the future. It does put your mind in a little bit of a pretzel. And when you bring up the name Jimmy Butler and what it could potentially take, if that's all it took, Moody, Wiggins, a draft pick, I'm absolutely entertaining that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think who else would want Jimmy Butler. Would Denver want Jimmy Butler? I don't think Minnesota's going to want him back. Is there a contender in either conference? Certainly Boston would not want Jimmy Butler. I don't think the Knicks really have any place for Jimmy Butler with the Villanova crew that they've got. Like, I think part of the reason the noise around him quieted so quickly this offseason is there are not a lot of great suitors. I don't know that the Heat are motivated to move him either, but if things aren't going well in Miami, and I don't wish this on him, but if, God forbid, Bam Adebayo gets hurt and Jimmy Butler is dragging a beat-up Heat team to a sub-500 record, who knows?
But then, I mean, I guess the draft pick at that point is enticing. Moody, they would have to extend him anyways. At that point, like,
but Moody is a legitimate future asset, as viewed around the league as a legitimate potential future player. He's still young. He does a lot of things for you, plays defense. Yes. And it's probably 2 future first rounders. You are mortgaging the key. And the reason I'd give up 2 future first round, or maybe let's try this on for size. And I don't think we need to do the whole show on a fake Jimmy Butler trade I made up. But what if it is just Kuminga and Wiggins for Jimmy Butler? Does that make the Warriors better? I think for a couple years, probably.
I don't think so.
No?
No,
I mean, it obviously depends on what Kuminga is today, this year. And I am very high on Jonathan Kuminga. But I just think Butler would be a pretty seamless fit.
I mean, I guess it depends. If you're looking at Andrew Wiggins for half of last year, absolutely. But I do still think he's a valuable player. Those people out there that are saying just cut him, cut his ass, get the dollar bills off the books. Let's restart. Andrew Wiggins doesn't like basketball. I think that's a little discrediting to the type of player that he was just, 14 months ago or whatever it was. He still has the athletic ability, needs to get, his mind back in the game. That's what, 50% of sports are. It's the physical, but it's also the mental. The mental aspect needs to take a turn. But I think giving up on him, getting rid of him, and getting rid of Jonathan Kuminga, especially, I mean, it's one thing if you're doing it in February and you kind of are starting to see like, all right, Kuminga's having some of the same issues. We just don't know if he's ever going to turn into this superstar. But if we're talking, September 7th right now, and you make that trade not knowing what Kuminga is going to be, like, I think that would be a little dicey on my end. I don't know how much better you're getting.
It's an interesting debate. It's not. God, Jimmy Butler's still very good. I think they'd really have to sit and think about it. And even if you're not sure it makes you better, it definitely raises your championship ceiling. I think, I don't really think you can debate that if you're going into a playoffs where you're going to have to face teams like Oklahoma City and Minnesota, Butler would be invaluable. I don't know. That's just one thing. Since we're talking bars from this article, can I give you another one? This isn't necessarily related to anything, but
where's my snare? Yeah, turn it up. Give me another bar.
If NBA basketball was a still body of water before Curry splashed into it, the impact since has been a relentless swell of waves that haven't stopped growing.
That's a line.
I mean, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's beautiful stuff. And I think we haven't. That's just a random bar for you. We haven't totally gotten to his overall point, which I think is, for my money, kind of how I've seen this team for the last year or two. When you win so much, there's a natural entitlement that develops amongst the fan base of like, well, we should be in this thing every year because that's what we do. But eventually that stops, whether you like it or not. And I'm not going to carry the water of the front office to say they haven't made mistakes. Certainly mistakes have been made. I mean, James Wiseman's right there in front of you. But I still believe that the logic behind almost everything they've done has been reasonably sound. There have been some gambles, and some bigger gambles than others. Some gambles that you could say were ill-advised. Again, had they traded the second overall pick in the Wiseman draft for an established player at that point, who knows what the last 5 years what it looks like. Like, who knows? It could have been anything. But had they drafted Tyrese Halliburton with that pick, right? I mean, who knows, right? There are mistakes that were made, but I still think it made sense what they did most of the steps along the way, all the way down to kicking tires for both Paul George and Lauri Markkanen this offseason. The reality is, as your stars start to age and you have not generally had the opportunity to get the best assets because you've been so good, it gets harder and harder to thread this needle. But they're still trying, and I think they're still trying in a smart way. And that seems to me to be the ultimate conclusion of this article, is like they're attempting a very difficult thing, and it's the sort of thing that you only do when you have a superstar of Steph Curry's caliber and loyalty. Right? He's said he wants to be here.
Yep.
You're not going to be the reason he's not staying here.
Coming up, there was a line in that article from The Ringer that says this is Curry's most competent and intriguing supporting cast since Kevin Durant left. Do you agree with that line? Next on Locked On Warriors. This show is sponsored by Betterhelp. And every once in a while, you have that long list of things you got to get done, and you just do not have the time in your day to get it done. But certain things in life are non-negotiable, like therapy. And BetterHelp makes it easy to make sure you get to those sessions at all times. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire, and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. It seems like they're taking a cautious approach, right? Which is the right way to do it when you're like Dan Devone, when I had him on a couple of months ago, he said, you don't want to be one of those teams that, when things are kind of coming down, from your high, and you have not won a playoff. You didn't make the playoffs the year prior, lost in the play-in. The year before that, you got smashed by the Lakers. It's been a couple of years since you won a championship. The last thing you want to do is try to right all your wrongs with one big splash and go out there and get that Paul George, trade away tons of assets, go out there, get the Lauri Markkanen, and meet Danny Ainge's demands, which was Podziemski, it was Moody, it was Kuminga, and it was draft picks. That to me is just overzealous. It's aggressive. It's stupid. So what the Warriors have kind of done, my logic, my bars that I have here is they're waiting in the weeds. Windhorst said it on a show with Stephen A. Smith a few weeks back after they extended Curry. It was like, watch out for the Warriors. And it wasn't because the Warriors are going to win an NBA championship. It was just because with how undersized they are and the defensive question marks they have and the lack of an established star compared to what the West has, like they're going to be active heading into this deadline. How do they build around Curry? We're going to figure out what they do. But I think one of the things that is lost in the shuffle is just internal growth. Podziemski, Moody, Trace, Kuminga. I mean, that's four guys right around the same age, right around the same experience level. I call it popping age. That's right around when a player usually tends to pop, right? Year 2, year 3, or year 4, they pop. Why are we so confident? Why is Dub Nation so confident that they're not going to pop, that a couple can't pop this season? Because it does seem like the consensus is this team can't be title contenders. If a few of them pop, I don't see why they can't be, at least in the top 5 of the West. And I mean, really pop. I mean, Kuminga's got to be an all-star.
Top 5, sure. I think top 4 is the bar, is where it's like that's where the line is. There's a delineation for me between the top 4. And if you just look at the top 3 to 4 to 5 players on OKC, Minnesota, Denver, and who am I forgetting? OKC, Minnesota, Denver,
Dallas.
It's going to have to be a hell of a pop to catch those teams from a top of the roster standpoint. I mean, just even if you just go top 2, right? Let's just think about the top 2 players on each of those teams. You've got Shea and either Chet or J-Dub, right? It's going to be a hell of a pop if Kuminga's as good as either of those guys, right? I mean, with respect, I can't believe I'm in a situation where I'm the guy down on Jonathan Kuminga, because I'm not. I'm very high on him. I think he has some fringe all-star potential this year. J-Dub has been a fringe all-star for 2 years already, right? Yep. If you're looking at Denver, Jokic and Murray, I mean, first of all, Jokic is better than Steph at this point. No question about that. Second of all, like, that's a big pop if Kuminga or Podziemski is going to get to a Jamal Murray level all of a sudden. And that would be great. I think for them to reach to mess with that top four, it's going to have to be a move, unless Kuminga or Podziemski is just literally ridiculous. But if all of those guys are a little better, I think that fifth seed, which is, a lot of people are penciling Phoenix in there, I don't see any reason they can't have as good a regular season as Phoenix if they do get good health, a sane Draymond, and some good play from the young guys.
Another thing that was quoted in the article is that this is Curry's most competent and intriguing supporting cast since KD left. So we're talking internal growth. We're hoping that Draymond Green can stay on the floor, that Andrew Wiggins gets back to somewhat of what he was. Forget 21-22, just 22-23 when he was not out for personal reasons. That Andrew Wiggins was good enough if they can get that version of Wiggins.
He was at least engaged, right?
Engaged, right? And they are now saying that, this article at least, that it's the most intriguing supporting cast since KD left and the most competent. You agree with that statement?
I do, if we're talking about 1 through 12. So,
but not 4 through 7 or 3 through 7 is what you're saying. It's not a top heavy roster. It's balanced,
right? Like maybe 6 through 10, right? Like you kind of, to love this roster, you got to cherry pick it a little bit, because you do have that group of dudes from 5 through 10 on this roster that are all high-level professional NBA basketball players. Kyle Anderson, DeAnthony Melton, Gary Payton, if healthy, Buddy Hield. I would put Trace Jackson Davis in that group of people. Honestly, Kuminga's in that for someone, right? So, all of these guys are interesting, competent players. Some of them are super talented players. You just don't have that number 2 and 3. I mean, Draymond's one of them, right? But certainly offensively, from a scoring perspective, there is not an obvious second scorer on this roster. Who do you think will be the second leading scorer for the Warriors? I mean, in a great world, it's Kuminga, but
it's got to be Kuminga. I mean, if you have championship aspirations, if we are to, guess what this team can potentially do, and I'm to say, hey, the Warriors can be a top 5 team in the West this season, you better fast forward to February, and Jonathan Kuminga's got to be averaging, 20 points a game. And it's more than just the stats, right? He's just got to be someone that you can get the ball in his hands and he can be a playmaker. Because if he's not, and if Podziemski's not, and Podziemski, doesn't clean up some of the turnover issues that he had in summer league. Now, he wasn't turnover prone last season, but he didn't have the ball in his hands nearly as much. And if that's the expectation this season, that's something that, just through dissecting his game with my own 2 eyeballs, he's got to clean that up, protect the basketball better. He's got to hit, 38, 40% of his threes like he did a season ago at 38%. If he does that, then he's valuable. And then we start talking, pieces to a puzzle. Can you complete a puzzle with, 12? It's a 12-piece puzzle instead of a 3-piece puzzle, because Dallas is top heavy, right? Phoenix, very top heavy. Some of these teams more top heavy than the Warriors. Warriors do have plenty of depth, but the old saying is defense wins championships. It's scoring wins championships. It's never depth. I've never heard that one. Depth wins championships, but maybe we coin that.
We talk a lot about rotation shortening in the playoffs, in fact. So, that being said, give me Steph Curry in the playoffs. I'm not going to write off his chances, provided the team is functional, because we've seen what he can do. from a roster perspective, catching up, particularly with Oklahoma City, but even with Minnesota and Denver, it just does feel like a very big ask. And, to those who say, well, I think the Warriors are probably more like 10th or 11th, what is there's no second star, and what is the rest of this roster? There's so many question marks, blah, blah, blah. It's not unfair to look at them that way. But I do think that virtually every team from what you would project to be the 5th or 6th spot down has similar questions. Like the Suns trio has barely been on the floor together still. None of those guys are paragons of health or consistency. The Lakers, God knows what they're doing, and their dudes are even older than the Warriors dudes. The Sacramento Kings have thrown a lot of new things together, but we don't know that that's all going to work perfectly. The Houston Rockets are young. The Memphis Grizzlies haven't had their star player around for 2 years. Like there's only 2 terrible teams in the conference with the Blazers and I think the Jazz. The Spurs, we'll see how good Wemby is. It's true that there are 10, 11 teams that could be better than the Warriors. I would agree with that. But I don't see a single team below that top 4 that doesn't have just as many questions as the Warriors have.
The good news, Kolsky, is we do have content for later on the week. I had teased that Matt Kolsky is going to be a guest host of this show for the upcoming weeks, as Kylan does have a lot of things going on in the broadcasting world. And we got a good one, man, with the headline: an anonymous NBA coach oddly likens the Warriors to a washed up rock band, saying that Steph Curry and the Warriors still believe they can produce chart topping records. But here's the deal. They're like one of those rock and roll bands that's still touring. They've still got their lead singer and they could crank it out at a high level, but it's just not the same band as it was before. And they haven't hit a record in a few years. So we get to respond to that probably on like Monday. That'll be Monday's show, Kolsky.
Oh man, I have some, I'm
plenty
already
of
ready.
takes.
I'm
Good
already ready for that. Yes. I don't think it's a bad analogy, but I think that person needs to learn more about rock music.
Oh, perfect. We're going to get a little rock and roll history lesson from Matt Kolsky as we're talking about that article moving forward. This is Locked On Warriors. It's free and available wherever you get your audio podcast. Chuck Walter, Matt Kolsky with you today, and we will talk to you as the week starts up. And man, we're less than a month away from camp, Kolsky. There's only many more shows that we have to do during hypothetical season where we bring up Jimmy Butler off One Report, and then we actually have news.
It's not even a report. It's literally just his name in parentheses.
Yeah. I like it though, man. If you want to throw out that hypothetical trade, I'll say do it. I do
think it's a good hypothetical trade, I will say.
Absolutely. I don't know how it helps out the Heat, but hey, if they think they're the whisperer, you can bring in Andrew Wiggins and see if you can get him to really step up his game. So Kolsky, good stuff here, and we will see y'all soon. Like and subscribe. Thanks for joining, everyone. See ya.